Barrio comrades, my name is Yeshitela and I am a member of the African People's Socialist Party and the Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party. Today we are having a special webinar titled Haitians at the Border, U.S. out of Haiti, down with colonialism, where we will be summing up the United States' deportation of 14,000 African people located at the Del Rio, Texas border, with more than half of them being from Haiti. We will also be holding a discussion on the causes of African migrants at the border, the mistreatment of the people there, the United States' history of attacks against Haiti, the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement's work at the Tijuana-San Diego border with African migrants from Haiti, the United States as a settler colonial state, the need for the immigration struggle to be an anti-colonial struggle, African people in Haiti being owed reparations by the United States, and making the international African revolution under the leadership of the African Socialist International. Our guest presenters include Luwezi Kinshasa, Secretary General of the African Socialist International, Elikya Ngoma, Haiti expert for the African People's Socialist Party and Haiti editor for the Burning Spear newspaper, of the official organ of the African People's Socialist Party and the voice of the International African Revolution, Comrade Dr. Matsemela Odom, Vice President of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, Harold Compere, founder and coordinator of Concerned Haitian and Friends, Benjamin Prado, Undersecretary of Union do Barrio, Penny Hess, Chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and as our keynote, Omali Yeshitela, Chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, leader of the Uhuru movement and the African Nation. Our first speaker is Luwezi Kinshasa, Secretary General of the African Socialist International, who will provide a historical overview of Haiti and attacks made by the U.S. against our people there. Uhuru Secretary General, Luwezi Kinshasa.
Uhuru, Director Akili, thank you so much for the introduction. I just want to salute my leadership, Chairman Yeshitela. I want to salute all the co-panelists who are present in this important meeting. Today, this meeting is a very important meeting. It's a meeting that it should be happening everywhere where Africans are located. It should be happening, should be organized by all colonized people, because the attack on Haiti is an attack on the African nation, but it's also an attack on all oppressed people in the Americas, in particular the indigenous people of the Americas. That's really, really important, because we know all the slander that takes place against Haiti every day. All bourgeois media press and even the African bourgeoisie have joined in. It is something that happens everywhere. And we just want to make sure people understand what we're looking at. We're looking at the attack that began in 1415. Africans in Haiti were attacked first in Africa, just like all the Africans who are outside Africa, in the Americas in particular, were attacked first in Africa, 1415. And by the time the Europeans, Christopher Columbus, attacked America, they called it discovery. That was an assault on the America. In 1492, some 77 years, elapsed between these two attacks, 1415 and 1492. This is really important because people need to realize we're looking at a trajectory that began in 1415. And when we see the Africans in Texas coming under attack, we're looking at the same process that began in 1415, that escalated in 1492, that is happening every day as we are all, witnessing the attacks on our Africans in Texas. And there is a myth about the situation for Africans in Haiti, the poverty of Haiti. You all know all the words they use, the curse of Haiti, the poorest, state or nation in the Western Hemisphere. You're familiar with all the slander they use, but they don't say anything about the amount of wealth that came out of Haiti that contributed in changing Europe, because Europe had no capital to become capitalist. Europe had no industry, for them to be considered as an industrial nation. It didn't have all those things. They took it, in colonizing Africa, the Americas, and the rest of the non-white people of the planet. But in particular, it was the wealth that was coming from Haiti that changed France. Most of the wealth that changed France came from Haiti. They used to call it the Pearl of Antilles, and this is really profound, that French Revolution was a direct outcome of the colonization of Africans in Haiti and throughout the Americas. But it's in Haiti that most of that wealth came from. And nobody, speaks of France, badly. On the contrary, people in France, they brag about French Revolution. They brag about the freedom. They talk about what they call it again, fraternity, liberty, and égalité. They brag about that they give to the world the Bill of Rights. That for the first time in France and throughout Europe, the white people can see themselves as citizens, not as serfs, but somebody who has a right to, to housing, to education, basic democratic rights we talk about today. That came at the expense of Haiti. And that's really, really, really significant, because the starting point, even for most of the historians who talk about the democratic period, as they call it, that Europe experienced, they start from the 1789 French Revolution. But the reality, the French Revolution was the revolution of the oppressor nation of France, which was a part of the great white nation, based on colonialism, based on a theft of land of the Americas, theft on a colonization of Africans throughout the world, basically made a revolution that overthrew feudalism. Basically, the aristocracy has to go. It was of no use, because the mode of production was no longer feudalism, it was colonialism. And so the French Revolution was a success of a mode of production of colonialism. It was success for them, but it was a nightmare for us, for Haiti and for Africans throughout the planet. So the point I'm trying to make here, Haiti entered the arena of revolutionary struggle as the most and the only successful revolution made by colonized slaves on the planet. It never happened before. And that revolution was superior, was higher than the revolution the French just made, because the French Revolution was a revolution of the oppressors. But the Haitian Revolution was a revolution of the oppressed. And that changed the world. It changed everything. It became the center of debate throughout the planet. We know, it's kept quietly. Everything is done to marginalize the Haitian Revolution. Newspapers are not allowed to talk about it, even when after a few years after it happens, most the newspapers banned the story about the Haitian Revolution. In Jamaica, in Cuba, and other places, don't talk about it, don't promote it, because it changed everything. It changed how Africans, how we saw ourselves. It changed how the oppressors saw us, because now every single plantation, colonial plantation in the world became a possibility, to experience another Haiti, could be transformed into another Haiti. So the fear in the oppressor's mind was real, that anywhere, anytime, any plantation can be turned into a successful slave rebellion. Not only that, we have people like Engels, that Marxists talk about, being someone who inspired Karl Marx. He had to review his dialectics of the battle between the slave and the oppressor, slave master. It has to review that. It has to come to a conclusion that it's possible for the oppressed, for the slave, not only to kill the slave master, but basically to end the oppression. Something he didn't think before. It promoted, it legitimized basically the relationship between the slave and the slave master before, and that's really is something that's really, really important because, as I said, Haitian revolution is really marginalized, deliberately, so that the Africans don't realize, the people of the world don't realize that this revolution all of us should be inspired by, should be looking at, is the revolution that happened in Haiti, because that was a revolution at the foundation of the colonial capitalist system. That was a foundation that threatened to eradicate this colonial system that continue basically to oppress us everywhere we are. So that's really was significant. And we also want to say a few things about the significance of Haiti. You already know it changed the size of the United States because of the Haitian Revolution. The United States size almost doubled overnight. They gain access to most of the Colorado. They gain access to most of the Montana and Dakotas, Washington and Oregon and state, Minnesota, all these places. The United States couldn't have access to them, couldn't own them. Napoleon was made bankrupt by the revolution of Africans in Haiti. Not only Napoleon was made bankrupt, but also the British took the opportunity to attack the French at sea, to control the sea, to make sure the French could not control the sea. They could not attack England by sea. Why? Because Napoleon went bankrupt. So not only we made US, what it is today, we also allow the British to achieve dominance of the world that lasted almost for a century. It's kept quiet, but that's also was because of the Haitian Revolution. And so all those things have to be said. So we appreciate the revolution that was made by our people in Haiti, but also we appreciate the central role Africans play in today's world economy, an economy based on world colonialism, without which there is no capitalism. It's as simple as that. And we also want to say that the Haitian Revolution, which is basically the essence, the African Revolution, is just by its very definition a criticism of everything that came to life or have a life because of colonialism, because of colonization of African people and other oppressed people on the planet. That's all, a real genuine revolution will do. And the Haitian Revolution, of course, is a criticism of enlightenment. We talked about the French being enlightened. They call themselves the light, so they're bringing light to the world. What kind of light can you bring to the world when your enlightenment requires colonization, colonial slavery? So, and the French Revolution, they were forced to introduce in the Constitution the abolition of slavery in 1793, because the Haitian Revolution, when it began in 1791, in August 1791, it was so powerful that it forced the French Revolution to include something about it, to say, they are abolishing, slavery, something like that. But it was not in 1789, it was 1793. So these also are significant. The African Revolution will be, as we develop, as we grow, we will change the whole world, because everybody will have to be in line with the success of the African Revolution. And the Haitian Revolution basically was a process to redefine the African personality, which is not complete yet. Because what is the African personality? What is African freedom? What is African, nationality? What is it? What is the African nation? So the Haitian Revolution was a process that in modern time began all that. Haiti couldn't do it by himself. That's the whole point of the African nation. African nation has to be free so that all Black people could have access to basic, freedom right, be citizen, and things like that. And also at the same time destroy parasitic capitalism, what we refer to colonial capitalism. It has to go. So Haiti basically was dealing for all these questions that our party, the African People's Socialist Party, and the leadership of Chairwoman of Yeshitela, we have answered all these questions that really explain why Haiti continues to suffer even today as we're having this meeting. And the Haitian Revolution also, as I said, basically is at the source of what we call national liberation struggle. Because a national liberation struggle has to be a struggle to get rid of the pedestal, of the foundation upon which colonial capitalism has been built. Of course, the foundation is colonization, theft of the land of the indigenous people. How can white people in America set the laws when they violated all the laws? They are not from the land. They are not even immigrants. They are invaders. You can be immigrants, people allow you in, but you're an invader. You invaded the place. You have no right to set any rules. Who should we come in? Who should be coming out? And the whole economy, as we know, was built with our labor, which means there is no economy where Africans could be a stranger. Africans from Haiti or from anywhere can go anywhere on the planet because the whole economy was brought together under the resources, the sweat, the labor of the colonized people, particularly of the African people. So we are not strangers anyway. Not only we are not strangers anyway, but we are also the first human beings. So without African immigrating out of Africa, you will not have humanity as it is today. So these really are significant. And I want just to say one thing. We know the French are responsible, and within the United States, of course, the whole white nation, Canada, all of them, they are responsible, but the French and then the United States, they are responsible for everything, all the misery or nightmare we're going through today in Texas and also in Haiti and wherever we have been dispersed as Africans from Haiti. You remember after the independence, because we declare ourselves independent after long war starting in 1791 and until in 1804 January the 1st, we declared ourselves under the leadership of Dessalines and Toussaint Louverture that we are free. But the French came back in 1825, and briefly France switched back to monarchy. They had a king called Charles the 10th. They imposed basically a ransom that the Haiti should pay 150 million in gold to France for the loss of the property, basically us. So we have to pay the French state, we have to pay the French bourgeoisie, and we have to pay the bank. So basically, we have to pay the bourgeois state, the bourgeois banks, and the bourgeois ex-slave owners. We go pay them. And what Africans need to know, the French came to Haiti in 1825 with an armada of 14 warships, 14, and with 528 cannons. And so basically, that was the gunboat diplomacy. You submit now, you pay us the ransom you're asking, or we're going to ransack Haiti, we're going to bomb Haiti. And they say, don't worry about the money, we will lend you the money. And what they did, they told Haiti, you're going to pay in, I think, 5 installments. And so they gave Haiti, they lent Haiti 30 million to begin with, to be paid in 25 years with an interest rate of 6%. Now, after the French have deducted the cost of giving them the money and the bonuses and things like that, Haiti only got 24 million. So they lent them 30 million, and the French kept all the 6 million of the money they're lending to Haiti. And so it took Haiti until 1952 from this article from Liberation in Paris to finish paying that. And basically, according to this article, Haiti was already ruined by the years of war, and this debt basically crippled Haiti for years. You don't hear that in the news. Haiti is poor because France crippled Haiti, that France forced Haiti to pay every year. And they say the amount Haiti has to pay in a year was more than Haiti used to make to send to France. So basically, they crippled Haiti, and the United States, who took over, who invaded Haiti in 1915 until 1934, stole everything they could steal from Haiti, gold, reserve, everything they could steal from Haiti. So my time is up. So I just end up by saying basically, we will have to be clear that it's reparation time. We say no to a single deportation of Africans from Haiti, from Texas in the US. We have the right to be in the United States. We build the United States. We got the right to be there. But the United States need to return everything they saw from Haiti. And the oil as a reparation by imposing Tonton Macoute leadership would kill African people in a way you can't just imagine. And France definitely must return every single money stole from us between 1825 until 1952, according to the French newspapers, and of course, reparation for all the wealth that went to France to build France, to make France what they call a democratic country as they define themselves today. So welcome this webinar, and I'm looking forward to discussion.
Uhuru S.G. Luwezi, I really want to appreciate your contribution to this program and the historical context of what's happening to Africans from Haiti at the border today, that understanding that these aren't isolated, or these things that happened in history and what's happening today aren't a part of some different situation, but it's all a part of the colonial question and the ongoing attacks against Haiti and Africans from Haiti because of the fact that Haiti has been, successful in, fighting against white power. And so this is just a part of an ongoing attack and punishment, as well as, just the whole colonial question. And I think too, what's really important in what you just laid out is just how the wealth of the white world was accumulated on the backs of African people, in this relationship of Africans in Haiti being, impoverished in these conditions, and how France and other places like the US experienced their wealth off the backs of, and based on the reality that we're forced to live under today. So I just appreciate you just breaking that open for us right at the beginning. So we're going to take it to Comrade Elikya Ngoma, who is the Haiti expert of the African People's Socialist Party, as well as the Haiti editor for the Burning Spear newspaper. And she'll be providing a summation of the contradictions at the Del Rio, Texas border. So Uhuru, Comrade Elikya, welcome to today's program.
Uhuru, thank you, Director Akile, for that introduction. As was stated, my name is Elikya Ngoma, and I am a member of the African People's Socialist Party. I am the administrative assistant for Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who leads the work of the African People's Socialist Party, and he has also assigned me to be the Haiti expert of the party and also the Haiti editor of the Burning Spear newspaper. I myself am an African from Haiti. My family is from Haiti, and we, I just wanted to provide some background as to what is taking place. And there are over 14,000 immigrants at the border, the Del Rio, Texas border, where more than half of them are Africans from Haiti. And so about over 7,000 Africans from Haiti or Haitians are facing deportation at the Texas border, where United States President Joe Biden has been sending back about 6 to 8 flights a day of Africans going back to Haiti. And I want to say that We have seen videos and pictures of the kind of treatment that has been, or mistreatment or an abuse of the Africans at the border. Border patrols being on horses, whipping at the Haitians. But I want to say that I have seen videos of people from Haiti or who has been deported, reporting to Haitian news and journalists that while they are on the planes, their hands and their feet actually had been chains, and they actually just remove the ropes and the chains just before they get off of the flight so that the journalists would not see it. But this is what is taking place aboard on the planes that are being sent back anyways. So according to the New York Times, the rise in Haitian migration began in the months after President Biden took office and quickly began reversing President Trump's immigration policies, which many people understood as a sign that the US would probably be more welcoming to migrants. And so in May, the administration extended temporary protected status for the 150,000 Haitians already living in the country. And I want to add that after the January 12, 2010 earthquake that took place in Haiti, so many Africans from Haiti were brought into this country. Some who already had family before, through this process called the temporary protected status. And over the years, the amount of time they could stay had been extended, but also many Africans who were leaving Haiti, and I will get to that shortly as to why, we do have this high level of migration, have been going to countries in so-called South or Latin America. So you do have an increase of Haitian people and Haitian communities in places like Chile, in places like Brazil, Venezuela, Peru, Panama. And there's a path that they go up until they get to Mexico oftentimes, and then they cross into the United States, or some just stay in those countries that are named, if they are not able to make that path to make it into the United States. So because of these recent changes, the hopes of many of our people have been risen to think that if they made it into the country, they would either be counted as one of those with TPS, and they would be, their stay would be allowed, or they just would not be turned back. But when you talk about the question of why, there is such an influx of Africans from Haiti in the United States, you have to talk about the questions of US colonialism in Haiti and the presence of the United States in Haiti, where we know that the United States is there to keep our people in oppression, to install neo-colonial presidents and neo-colonial, government leaders that do not work in the interests of our people, but instead just continue to steal our wealth and resources, and also keep our people tied to the colonial enslavers, which is the United States themselves. And so when you have people leaving countries such as Haiti or other parts of the world to come to places like the United States, France, and Canada, we are going to the same places that are constantly raping our people of our wealth and resources. And that action is actually us chasing our own resources, whether the people who are making that move are actively conscious of that at that moment, or if they think that the United States is the so-called land of promises or the so-called land of the free. When it comes to the Haiti and USA relationship in particular, Secretary General Luwezi actually just spoke a lot to this, but I will say this anyway. We know that the United States has been involved in an over 200-year process of punishing our people in Haiti for the courageous revolution that we won in November of 1803, and that, as he says, the date that we celebrate is January 1st, January 1st, 1804, where between 1791 and 1803, for 13 years straight, the Africans there were united in extremely organized resistance, organized struggle, relentless struggle, and just efforts to make a revolution, which would actually become the first workers' revolution in the world, the first revolution won by enslaved people against colonial slavery. And it was this revolution that almost single-handedly crushed the colonialist capitalist system, which has gained all of its wealth and everything that it benefits off of the backs of our people. And so this is the same system that Africans in Haiti almost crushed by ourselves by defeating the British, the Spanish, and finally the French, which at the time that the army fought against the French army was the most powerful army on earth. And they teach that Napoleon, colonial education teaches that he has never been defeated, but that is a lie. He was defeated by African people and African people from Haiti. So since then, Haiti has been made to pay for standing up to the colonial enslavers and standing up for the freedom of African people around the world. As SG Luwezi said, that Haiti has been made to pay France reparations. And, you know, the United States, France, all of the white imperialist countries band together to make Haiti pay for that revolution. Haiti had to pay over $90 billion if you had to in gold, if you had to convert it in today's gold's prices. You also have the United States that came into Haiti from 1915 and occupied Haiti. And at the point that it was leaving, left with every single ounce of gold that was in the Haitian treasury and brought it to New York City. And again, this is the question of why, you know, of African people or Haitians chasing our own resources when we do end up in these countries, because the wealth that is in those countries come directly from us. And this is the relationship that we have to these kind of countries. It's a parasitic relationship, and it's a relationship that enriches them and impoverishes us. You know, so when you see this taking place, you know, Haiti has been made unlivable. A lot of people deem it as unlivable, and that is as a result of colonialism, and of course through neocolonialism, which neocolonialism, as we say in the African People's Socialist Party, and you also read this a lot in the Burning Spear newspaper, is when the colonizer takes a force or forces from the colonized people that they are oppressing and use them to deepen their oppression. It's what Barack Obama was in the United States. When you talk about Barack Obama coming from the Black community, and he was a neocolonial leader. And so they make you know, these countries unlivable, and this is what causes this, you know, this amount of people having to leave a country. It's not because they're just so desperate to come to the United States or any place like that. When it comes to Africans from Haiti in particular, in the United States is always engaged in a campaign against the people of Haiti. In the 1980s, when the HIV/AIDS crisis first came about, Haitians was named as one of the 4 H's that was to be blamed for the existence of HIV/AIDS, which was homosexuals, Haitians, heroin addicts, and hemophiliacs. And so, you know, this, and I'm saying this because when you see the treatment at the border, this is not something that came out of nowhere. This is indeed an attack against not only African people, but also it's a very much anti-Haitian act. The United States was also engaged in the destruction of our economy, from the rice tariff that was implemented by Bill Clinton, where the Haitian farmers had to be turned away from producing and selling our own rice to import rice from the United States, which was turned out to be not only a poison for our people, but of course a poison for our own economy, because our agriculture, that's one of the aspects of our agriculture that has been stifled. And the United States government continues to humiliate people from Haiti as a message to ourselves and to Black people around the world that you will forever pay for waging this revolution that, as Luwezi and myself spoke about earlier. On the question of immigration and deportation, something that was very popular in the mid-90s was the wet feet, dry feet policy, and the difference in how that was implemented when you had migrants coming in from Cuba versus from Haiti. And the migrants coming in from Cuba were specifically those who had betrayed the revolutionary forces of Cuba, those who were united with white nationalism and the United States, and just counterinsurgent forces, where if they made it to the United States, if they were found around shore, then they would be turned back. But if that was the wet feet. But if they made it to, if they were found in the waters, they would be turned back. That's wet feet. But if they made it to shore, then they would be able to stay in the country. That's dry feet. And so the thing about that was, especially growing up in Miami, sometimes they didn't even have to come by boat. They could come into the country any other ways illegally, make it quickly somewhere like by water, and then appear on shore to make it seem like that's the method that they took to come in. And either way, they would be allowed into the country. Whereas, African people from Haiti, doesn't matter how we came, you would be turned back. So, this is, again, an ongoing contradiction between the United States and Haiti. But the reality is that the United States actually has no right to talk about, or legitimacy to talk about, the question of immigration and who is legal or illegal in any country, and especially not in this country, because the United States itself, is a country that was created by stealing someone else's land. You just impose yourself onto someone else's land. So there's no legitimacy to white people, ever saying who's an immigrant and who can stay and who can be sent back, and for whatever reason, because they would have to be the first to go. Just like the United States went into Haiti in 1492 when Christopher Columbus landed. He landed in Haiti, in northern Haiti, in fact. And by him being there, brought in so many diseases, and of course the rape, the murder, but also just their actual diseases, killed off just about everybody. There's none of the indigenous Taino people that were on the island that are still present today. So, as the African People's Socialist Party, we condemn the actions of the United States. We also condemn the actions of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's administration. And we say that the United States should be getting out of Haiti because it's the United States that has been crossing Haiti. We raise up the people of Haiti. We raise up the African Revolution of Haiti. We raise up Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who was the fearless leader of that revolution, who introduced the slogan, Coupe tête boule caille, which is Creole for cut heads, burn houses. He was a non-compromising, non-surrendering kind of leader who understood that in order for African people to be free, we have to be completely removed from colonialism and completely removed from the colonizer. Jean-Jacques Dessalines also understood the oneness of the African nation, because after the revolution, he made a call to Black people around the world and said, if you made it to Haiti, you would be free. So, Haiti, he was setting up Haiti, if you wanted to say the land of the free, that would be Haiti under Jean-Jacques Dessalines' leadership. So we believe that the US must be condemned for their actions against our people, and that the Biden administration must be condemned for their action against African people from Haiti. Those of us in the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, we are African internationalists. We believe that all Black people are a part of a single nation, and that is the African nation. We believe that all African people must unite for revolution, because that's the only solution for our problems faced, whether it is in the United States, in Haiti, in the Caribbean, in the continent, in Europe. And so, you know, this is a call I know one will be made later, but to African people who have been sympathizing with the people from Haiti over the past few weeks after seeing these photos and videos, the call to you is to join the African People's Socialist Party, because this is all of our problems. It's not just our problems there in Haiti. Africans in Haiti must join the African People's Socialist Party too, because all of our problems are each other's problems as the African nation. We also believe that all African people are owed reparations for the centuries of genocide, rape, murder, and theft of our resources that was used to enrich the European nation, and that is still taking place, that enriches the United States, Canada, France, and all of these other countries that we run to. So in the spirit of Jean-Jacques Dessalines, we want to cut all ties with the colonizer. We say coupe tête, boule kai, victory to the people of Haiti, long live the Haitian Revolution, vive Haiti, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Comrade Elikya, coupe tête, boule kai. Thank you so much for just that profound presentation. Again, the context of, the question of the attacks against African people in Haiti. And I really, really appreciate the last part of your presentation of really connecting Africans all around the world to this struggle. We are one people, we are one African people, and what's happening to Africans from Haiti has to be recognized as an attack on all African people, no matter where we've been dispersed, no matter what colonial identifying label we have on ourselves, that we have to connect ourselves. We have to see that what's happening to Africans from Haiti, what's happening to them is happening to us. It's a part of the same issue. It's the same enemy. And we have a responsibility to organize where we are, the front of the African Revolution, to overturn our conditions once and for all. So thank you so much for this really incredible presentation. And we're going to move now to our next speaker, which is Comrade Dr. Matsemela Odom, who is the Vice President of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. And PDUM was founded in 1991 under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. It is our mass organization to bring African people back into political life following the counterinsurgency defeat of the Black Revolution of the 60s. And Matsemela will be speaking about PDUM's work at the Tijuana-San Diego border through their Black Power at the Border campaign and the conditions of African people from Haiti there. So Uhuru, Comrade Dr. Matsemela Odom, welcome to our program.
Uhuru, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Dr. Matsemela Odom, or Matsemela Odom, the International Vice President of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. I'd like to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the leader of the International African Revolution and the founder of the Uhuru Movement, who you'll hear from today. As well, I'd also like to salute President Colin Bayan, the NED of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, as well as Luwezi Kinshasa, Secretary General of the African Socialist International. Moreover, I'd like to send my deepest revolutionary salutations to Elikya Ngoma, our Haiti expert, for her leadership on this question here today. Now, the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, as you all heard, was formed in 1991 as a global organization in defense of the democratic rights of the African working class. PDUM's aim has been to defend the African community against the onslaught of attacks from the colonizer state and bring Africans back into political life. So, we believe that self-determination is the highest form of true democracy. We stand firmly against the violation of the human rights of African people from Haiti and in rejection to the colonial borders imposed on colonized people around the world. To say this is an immigrant crisis, I think, is to suggest that the Africans themselves play some part in the construction of the hellhole in which Africans have been placed. African internationalists, we know that what we're witnessing is a crisis of colonial capitalism, a crisis of imperialism. Colonialism is the foreign and alien domination of a people for the purpose of economic exploitation and political advantage of that foreign and alien force. It strips people of all human and civil rights to rule without regard to law, which I do think is important, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela has shown us that some of what we say is a violation of law, but it's not a violation of laws from the colonizers. It's not actually illegal when they do it. It's actually within the construction of their legal structure, which underscores the colonial contradictions at play. So for 600 years, the African people and African people have been robbed of our life, labor, and resources. We've been robbed of our ability to produce for ourselves under conditions we have chosen. So impedance position, in defense of the national democratic rights of African people, impedance forwards the Revolutionary National Democratic Program as a way forward. In the Revolutionary National Democratic Program, we recognize all African people throughout the world as comprising one African nation that has been forcibly dispersed and impoverished by slavery, colonialism, and other machinations of imperialism. As well, we demand the immediate removal of borders separating our brothers and sisters from each other. That includes this colonial border imposed upon the indigenous people of Mexico, following a colonial assault against Mexico almost 200 years ago by the US. The borders must come down, not only because they violate an imperialist definition of our identity as separate people to our disadvantage, but also because the borders restrict us to an economy that will never be large enough to provide for our needs and to transform our situation. So in the San Diego area, Impedum has organized a working group called Black Power at the Border. Following a series of protests by African people in Tijuana in July 2019, the International People Democratic Uhuru movement organized what we call Black Power at the Border. Black Power at the Border is a working group of the Africans Charged Genocide Campaign that addresses these border-related issues, but also has brought the needed political organization to the African community in Tijuana, where over 5,000 Africans live. Where almost 5,000 people who have recently come from the Caribbean, namely Haiti, as well as other parts of Africa, namely Central Africa, live. And with the rent as high as average of monthly rent as high as about $2,000 a month, you even see Africans born in San Diego, born in the U.S., being pushed to Tijuana. So Tijuana is a site of clear anti-colonial struggle. Africans from Cameroon, Haiti, Mauritania, Sierra Leone, all throughout Central America and other countries are in Tijuana due to these different, like we said, push-pull factors of neo-colonial violence and the misguided promises of some sort of labor opportunities. The conditions of Africans in Tijuana are dire, but Africans recognize the need for unity and internationalism and organization. This is why we have been able to organize down here. In 2016, Impedum San Diego forces had partnered with local humanitarian groups to go down there initially. Those mobilizations had dissipated, and we had resurrected them with the Black Power at the Border campaign, of which we led. The working group dispensed thousands of pounds, actually, of food, clothing, and other resources down in Tijuana. that we gathered through a series of donation drives, really allowing for the African community here to contribute to the development and security of the African community there, but also underscoring that the need for African self-determination in this project, right? The Burning Spear newspaper and other literature was distributed amongst people throughout Tijuana, and new contacts and signups actually had taken place down there. Now, like I said, this is what set apart our campaign from charity organizations, which go down there for the purpose of simply distributing. Ours was to promote the African Internationalist Organization and unity amongst the African working class in Tijuana. This allowed for recruitment of Africans actually into the local Impedum branch in the area as well. Africans in Tijuana have gravitated towards African Internationalist Organization because of their shared beliefs in people like Kwame Nkrumah, Thomas Sankara, and things like that. The African working class throughout Mexico have come into that we've all come into contact can clearly see the need for African unity and self-determination. Some of the comrades and volunteers in Tijuana actually came to the histories of with progressive activism, which is why the neo-colonial violence had pushed them out of the countries where they were at, be it in Central Africa, Haiti, or even the work that they've been doing in parts of Central America and Mexico. Others have learned the crucial importance of self-reliance and African unity as they wage their courageous struggles against really the state militaries in Central America and Southern Mexico. Now, some of this work had been complicated by way of the COVID-19 colonial virus pandemic, but nevertheless, once again, Uhuru Movement Organization was brought there by way of the contacts that we had made, even while the movement of Impedum and party members in San Diego has ceased to go across the border. So resources were raised. People's War information was distributed across the border as well. People's War protocols were distributed, and without a doubt, it led towards increased safety of the African community across the border, in which not too many lives, well, actually no lives of the people we organized with have been lost. However, members of the community at large have been killed, not from like I said, from the colonial contradictions. For example, one brother died over there during the pandemic. He didn't die of COVID-19, but he died because of the fact that they charge a rate of as many as $500 to $800 US dollars for people to be seen in hospitals. And the guy was refused medical care and he died. We organized in support of him, in support of his burial over there. So the current crisis, right? The International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement has organized in defense of the African people from Haiti at the U.S.-Mexico colonial border. From North America to the Caribbean, to Europe to Africa, we've risen to the occasion, organizing a series of demonstrations over the past few weeks, bringing the African Internationalist leadership to the question. Here I'll put forward the immediate demands that Impedum has placed. We demand an amnesty for all the thousands of African people being held captive in Del Rio. We demand that the U.S. government pay reparations to the Africans from Haiti held captive in Del Rio and African people around the world victimized by more than 400 years, actually more than 500 plus years of slavery and colonialism. We demand the immediate end to the inhumane treatment of our people in Del Rio, who are victims of the US supported and engineered neocolonialism in Haiti, where the Black middle class continues to keep the Black working class and poor majority in the state of oppression and desperation. We demand that the United Nations sanction the United States and force them to pay reparations to the worldwide African nation. We demand an end to the political, economic, and social oppression and domination of African people around the world who live as colonial subjects of the US and Western imperialists. This colonial domination must be overturned if African people are to ever be free. Now, I want to end by talking about something. Recently, in progressive sectors of the immigration rights community, people have begun to speak of this idea of crimmigration, right? The overlapping, I guess, the nexus of sorts between this idea of immigration and criminalization of migrant communities. So I want to salute Comrade Michelle Odom, who has been making work on this and has actually sort of intervened, has offered an important intervention into this understanding of crimmigration in a recent publication that Comrade Michelle is putting forward, noting that, look, crimmigration is nothing but the colonialism, the colonization of African people. Comrade Michelle notes, and I quote, "It is the African working class that migrates in our communities, that tossed around the city map due to redlining," underscoring that it is the African working class that flees Haiti, Central Africa, because of the violence, the lack of economic development and opportunities caused by colonialism. It is the African working class that produces the value in this system, either through their exploitation as workers or as detainees or poor non-citizens on welfare that we have been forced into. The enslavement and exploitation of the African working class produces jobs for the white world and other middle upper class aspiring colonized Africans who have skills in particular areas. It is the African working class that built the universities that allow us even to produce such scholarship as the comrade is working on. So what the comrade notes is that this migration, immigration, seeking asylum, a refugee flight, all this will be vain. All the struggling the people will be in vain if we do not come to the important necessary conclusion that this process, we need to move towards an anti-colonial position. So I'm calling on people to embrace an anti-colonial position of the rights of immigration of these African migrants at the border, moving toward and as a part of this as African people, we need to move towards a principled unity under a theory that requires practice and a world under the worldwide view of the worldview of the African working class. That is African internationalism, and as she notes, it is then the duty of all African people, right? All African people in this fight to return our intellect, our skills, our energy back towards developing and empowering for our own people. It is this, like I said, it is this that provides our way forward. So for Comrade Michelle, the adoption of African internationalism is the solution to this so-called crimmigration, as people have come to call it. Africans, people require require this for us to be free. It's the only way forward for us as African people, right? African internationalism will not guide us simply to end crimmigration, but colonialism at an overall. African internationalism will not only fight for the civil rights and economic development, but to develop genuine self-determination, economic development on our own terms. The theory of African internationalism will guide Africans will not simply guide us to survive under imperialism, but to develop and return our skills to the development of the African nation. The African internationalism will not simply guide us to fight for better immigration rights underneath this system, but instead we need to demand and guide how to create a new world for all oppressed and colonized people around the world. African internationalism finally will not guide Africans to change laws of immigration underneath imperialism, but instead will guide Africans and other colonized people to call out the illegitimate colonial borders created by the colonizer and to fight to take back our respective land for ourselves. So salute to everybody. Salute to Director Elikya. Salute to Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And thank you.
Uhuru, Vice President Matsemela, thank you so much for speaking on behalf of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and really want to salute this Black Power at the Border campaign and just how the party takes on these different questions in the form of the mass organizations, this campaign, inserting African internationalism into the whole anti-immigration discussion, bringing it beyond this whole thing of anti-immigration and making it a colonial contradiction and making the solution, therefore, so much more clear that we can't fight for or reform immigration policies under imperialism, but we have to approach this with from an anti-colonial position and recognize that the immigration question coming from a settler colony, notice the contradiction in that itself. So just really appreciate this campaign and raising up the political question even deeper by, again, inserting African internationalism into it. So again, salute and Pidam. Thank you, Comrade Matsemela. And while you guys are watching, wherever you're located, just want to really encourage you guys to hear what we're saying today, because we're not just having a discussion just to talk about these issues, just to provide history, but what Matsemela brought was really important because it's the practical work that we do to take on this question. And we have to fight everywhere it is that we are located. We say fight, build the African Revolution in the front that you're located. And I'm based out in the US, which means I have to be a part of the US front of the African Revolution. We have people on in Kenya, in Sierra Leone, occupied Azania, and Bristol, United Kingdom, all throughout the world. People are tuned into this discussion right now, and we have a responsibility to build the African Revolution where we are. We have a responsibility to do the practical work of the revolution. And we can do that right now. So we see the situation happening at the border with our people. We know that there is something for us to do. And Matsemela just gave us a brilliant example of that, the work that we can get involved in right now. So I really want to call on you to join the African People's Socialist Party. If you're an African, no matter where you're located in the world, if you want to build the front of the African Revolution where you're located, go to APSP, Uhuru.org. Fill out our contact form and await for more information in terms of joining the African People's Socialist Party. But this is the time, this is the period that we can't make any excuses. We have to get in this struggle. As we see, this system is in total crisis. I mean, it's falling apart all at the seams all over the world. And we have to continue time and time again to deliver the death blow, which requires us to organize around critical questions like the one we're discussing today. So APSP, Uhuru.org to fill out our contact form, join the African Revolution, and also support, because we're having this discussion. We're coming from and explaining this situation from the position of African internationalism, which is the theory and worldview of the African working class. And this was developed by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, over the process of him being engaged in this struggle for over 50 years. The African working class finally has our own worldview where we're able to explain our reality, define who we are for the rest of the world, versus being defined based on the position that somebody is, living at our expense. So our whole reality has been defined by our white power, by our colonial oppressors for hundreds of years. And now we're explaining our own reality and paving our future forward. That's African internationalism. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela has taught us to examine the world with this theory through the lens of the African working class, which allows us to come to these conclusions today. So I want to encourage you to also support the work of Chairman Omali Yeshitela by donating to paypal.me/Omali taught me, because every discussion we're having right now is because Chairman Omali Yeshitela taught us. So support the work of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Again, paypal.me/Omali taught me, and help us raise a goal of $200 today, again, to support the work of the chairman. So you guys can do that throughout this discussion, and we have more for you. So I'm excited to bring up this brother, Harold Compere, founder and coordinator of Concerned Haitians and Friends, an organization founded in 1987 in St. Louis, Missouri, after the slaughter and massacre of Haitian people by the neo-colonialist Haitian military. Some of their work includes organized protests, conferences, and teach-ins. They also raised money for Jean-Bertrand Aristide's campaign for presidency. After the bloody coup d'etat of September 1990 that ousted President Aristide, they organized multiple demonstrations for his return. They have publicly disagreed that American military troops had to step foot in Haitian territory. So let's bring up Brother Harold Compere from Concerned Haitians and Friends. Let's see if, let's get him on. Brother Harold, can you hear me? There you go.
I can hear you very well. Okay, I want to thank everybody for who has spoken so far. Okay, and I am touched by the fact that my African brothers and sisters, okay, have a what I will call in my language a Pan-Africanist view of the struggle of people of African descent in Africa and in Haiti. So thank you very much. Okay, that really is an encouragement. Okay, that people know that you are not alone, you are not a little group, and then you have a backing and support. Okay, to continue the fight for self-determination in Haiti. Okay, so what I will be saying, okay, is not only specifically geared to Haiti, but also all the people of African descent on the continent, okay, and in the Americas. Everybody normally is disturbed, okay, by the pictures that they saw of Haitians who have been mistreated, okay, in Del Rio, Texas, okay, by the American police. And this is right. They indeed violate the Biden administration violate international laws by acting of this way, and they violate also their own laws. Okay, because I heard some lawyers talking about it, and some of them are taking steps, okay, to see if they can sue the U.S. government on that. So I think we should encourage this kind of move, okay, because there is a question of respect and dignity of human beings. If we consider the fact that the reason why Haitians, okay, are leaving their country is because the U.S. has a lot to do with it, destabilizing the country, by destabilizing a country, what the US was able to do, they make sure there will be no leader who will be able to implement national policies for the benefits of Haitian people. That's what they did. So, because there is instability, so there is no time, okay, for an Haitian government. They don't even last, in fact, to come to have a continuum of a political structure for the development of Haiti. So they destabilize the country in this sense. They do that also in many countries in Africa. So what we have seen, okay, is on the border. Not only is the US is directly responsible for the misery of Haitian people, but the question we've been asked, okay, by many people that there's a lot of them. Yes, but in my view, there should have been more Haitians. Okay, because the US is not only has plundered Haiti over the years. There is a speaker before me who outlined the fact that, remember the fact that in June 30, 1915, the US came to the US Marine came to the National Bank of Haiti. It took the gold with them back in their country. Okay, you know, it's something that the countrymen like Al Capone used to do. So you see, this is the type of mind. Okay, this time that's something is not a private citizen who is doing it. It's the U.S. government. So it shows you the kind of mind of people that we have problem with. We have problem with. Now, having said so, my main I am going to leave this aspect of the Haitian in the border alone, okay, and think about what has seen a state of confusion in Haiti. That Haitian who are accept to live, okay, in a state of abnormality. They have not understood that after they took President Aristide in 2004 out of the country, they have not, the people in Haiti, the so-called leaders, accept to reshuffle the cards. They have not seen by doing that, indeed, there is a reason why the US removed Aristide out of the country. They have not analyzed that. Okay, they seems thinking is an affair of preference. They didn't like him, okay, and they like them instead. The mental slave thinking. So by accepting to reshuffle the cards, so we have met now a lot of leaders who are really subservient 100% to US interests. Indeed, those leaders, I can say, they are, I will say, some kind of, they have a title of president of Haiti, but when you look at very well, they are some kind of governor appointed by Washington to Haiti. Okay, we call them president, but in reality, they are governor appointed by Haiti, by Washington, by the US government, okay, to lead Haiti. They have limits in what they are doing, and they know that. That is when they get in power, they enrich themselves really quick. okay, because they knew they're not going to be able to do anything serious really. If they think they're going to do something serious, the US is going to remove them from power. We have that happens not only on Aristide, but we have that happen also in 1988 when Leslie Maniga decided to betray the Haitian people who were killed inside the polling booths, okay, to abort the election who were going to take place. However, when he came in power, Leslie Maniga showed that he was able to govern the country. Everybody, okay, was able to say, there is someone who is thinking, there is someone at the helm of the country who can lead the country. But the US, after using him just to give breathing room to the military, the US decide this guy is too serious. We're going to get rid of him because he is a bourgeois nationalist. Okay, we cannot deal with a nationalist. Okay, so they get rid of Leslie Maniga. There was no reason. People say that because the reason why they get rid of Aristide, that because a President Aristide used to talk bad about the US, but Maniga has not done so. Okay, like Aristide. So why do they remove Maniga? Maniga didn't do anything. He wasn't really what the US would have called a leftist, but because he was serious. Even though he did betray the Haitian people by agreeing to participate in those fraudulent elections, okay, still when he get there, okay, he's one of the people who think they can take a positive out of a negative. That didn't work for him and didn't work for the Haitian people. But he learned that before he died. And I mentioned his name is to show there is a consistent approach of the US in Haiti. If you are serious, they're going to get rid of you. Purely and simply. And the reason why? Because they understand if we put corrupt people in the government, the serious people who do not have any political power are going to leave the country. There will be a brain, what they call a drain of a capable brain from Haiti and to go and serve outside of Haiti. They knew that. So this is part of the destabilization we continue to display. So I'm asking, okay, if there's some Haitian who are listening to me and some African also. If you look at it very well, the international community, when I say an international community, I mean three countries. The three countries would be the coup d'etat in 2004, France, Canada, and the US mainly. They want to organize elections. But Haitians should not rush to do those elections. Haitians should take their time. Indeed, the Haitians do not have to have a structural government that the international community can manipulate. I am pretty sure there's a lot of intelligent Haitians around the world who can map out, okay, a form of government for now that out of reach of the international community, that the international community cannot manipulate, and that a structure of government, okay, can then, okay, instill, okay, a new confidence in the mind of Haitian people and see there is a new direction to the country. we don't have to repeat the same mistake we are doing. Every time we want to go to election that the international community are doing, are we crazy? Because that's crazy people and non-intelligent people who keep repeating the same mistake over and over and over. We have used the same means of government. We have seen, okay, those are not doing any good at all. We cannot keep repeating them. So it is in our right. This is our right of self-determination. And that is why I was touched by the fact that I saw so many people of African descent with us, so that they can understand what's going on, okay, to continue to back us up, okay, because we need self-determination to be able to do what I'm saying, to do not give the U.S. government, the international community, okay, a government that copy on their own form of government. No, it should be something the Haitian people will devise that the international community cannot manipulate anymore. And after we shall see. And I believe also what I'm saying about Haiti belongs to a lot of Haitian people, to a lot of African people inside the continent also, who probably will need to devise a form of government that France, Great Britain, the US, okay, cannot manipulate. It doesn't take really a genius to do that. Okay, it's simply we have to decide that's what we're going to do and put a place, a committee, okay, a group of people who decide to do it. A people who knows that if once they go and do that, okay, their life is in danger. Because we have seen in history, time after time, many thousands of pages of history shows when there is an African leader, a leader of African descent, who wants to do something for the people. It could be here in the United States with Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and others. In Africa, they kill you. So you knew the people who are going to do that knew white men are going to kill you. Okay, but you must educate your people, and that is why I'm seizing this opportunity, okay, to make them understand there is a sacrifice. Okay, if we're going to make change, and to know when the white men kill us, other Haitian, other African will stand up and they will explain to their people, we knew the white man is going to kill us because we want to change. But we have to tell the African people, this is the price to pay. Okay? And we are willing to pay this price. Okay? Thank you very much. Yeah, I think I am finished with my if we call it an expose, but my ideas on the situation.
Uhuru, comrade, brother Harold, thank you so much for your contribution to this discussion. And I really appreciate you highlighting this thing of neocolonialism, white power, and blackface, and its presence in Haiti, and it's showing the direct role of these imperialist powers like the US, intervening in the affairs of African people. And just think it's right on that what we're saying, we need self-determination, we need to be a free people, and we have to organize as Africans all around the world to fight back for Haiti and to fight for Africa, and recognize that the fight for Haiti is the fight for Africa. So I just, again, really appreciate what you brought to this discussion. And thank you so much for being here with us. So we're going to move to Comrade Benjamin Prado, who is the Undersecretary General of the Mexican Liberation Organization Uniendo Barrio, and he is going to be discussing the need for the immigration struggle to be made into an anti-colonial struggle and unity between colonized and oppressed peoples. So, Uhuru, Comrade Benjamin, welcome to the program.
Uhuru, Akile, thank you very much, and to the African People's Socialist Party for this important invitation, this very important discussion that we're having here today. You know, on behalf of Unión del Barrio, we want to unite with this conversation and dialogue and discussion of making the immigration question, addressing it from an anti-colonial perspective, and it must be an anti-colonial struggle. You know, for Unión del Barrio, who is a Mexican organization founded from the struggles of the Chicano power movement of the 60s and 70s, you know, our understanding as a Mexican people is that these political borders that have been erected as an affront to the indigenous peoples of these lands, right? You know, as correctly Elikya summed up earlier, is that the US is an illegal settler nation, that the United States has no moral or legitimate right to say who can come or who can migrate to this territory known as the United States. As an illegal settler nation, its colonial laws were fabricated and constructed with the objective of subjecting the indigenous population to servitude and bringing and kidnapping Africans and brought here to the United States in the form of slavery, is the pedestal upon which this sick colonial system exists. And so, you know, we unite with this question of challenging U.S. imperialism and U.S. colonial, this colonial system, from its ability from not only detaining, from incarcerating and deporting, you know, Africans from Haiti, but we also, you know, look at this question from a historical political perspective, recognizing that the political borders that were erected are fundamentally an act of war against indigenous people, against the Mexicano nation itself. You know, when we talk about the borders themselves, right? You know, Mexico by 1821 had won its independence from the colonial Spanish crown. And in 1821, you know, the people who led that righteous rebellion of 1810 of Mexican independence were African people themselves, right? Jose Maria Morelos y Pavón, our own national heroes, Vicente Guerrero, were also African, Afro-Mexicans, right, as they would call them. But the reality is, you know, as we struggled for independence, the vast territory that today is known as Texas, Arizona, Nuevo Mexico, Colorado, California, Utah, Nevada, all this vast territory was part of the independent Mexican nation of 1821, right? And so, you know, recognizing that the United States, in its drive to expand slavery, actually assaulted Mexico, just like Matsemela and even Luwezi summed up, right? That it was an assault not only in 1846 that it assaulted Mexico, but even its assault on the entire continent in 1492, right? So we recognize this, our struggle that's happening there at the political border, whether it be in Del Rio, whether it be you know, in El Paso, Ciudad Juarez, or whether it be in Tijuana, San Diego, that same struggle of people crossing was created by U.S. imperialism, right? U.S. imperialism that invaded us in 1848, that invaded our territories, that was opposed to Mexico being a free, slave-free nation, right? That Mexico, by declaring an end to slavery, had allowed thousands upon thousands of African people to come to its territory and escape that wretched system of slavery. The United States, in its doctrine of manifest destiny, of colonial superiority, thought that it can invade us, that it can annihilate us, but we're still here, right? That we still have a responsibility to create historical memory of who we are and that we are indigenous to these lands, and that that colonial border is the illegal manifestation of this manifest destiny, that it required an invasion of Mexico, that it required annihilation of thousands upon thousands and now even millions of people to colonize the entire, what is known as the entire Southwest. And that's why we say that the United States doesn't have any moral authority, doesn't have the authority to tell us, who can cross and who cannot, because we recognize these as still stolen, occupied Mexican land, and it's occupied by a foreign colonial army in the form of the Border Patrol, in the form of all of its branches of military, and in the form of even those hostile entities known as Immigration and Customs Enforcement that come into our barrios to surveil our people, to detain our people, throw us in concentration camps. And this whole immigration system as it exists today is a fabrication of US colonial policy, a policy that fundamentally has as its goal an economic objective of monetizing our Black, Africans, and Mexican indigenous peoples, that for every person that they consider, they consider illegal, we say that they're illegal, right? That they monetize us to hold us in these concentration camps known as prisons or detention centers that are run by private corporations, that there's actual numbers that they calculate every year to see how many people should be locked up in these dungeons. And it has its basis as, again, a sick parasitic capitalist system. Even the concept of the authorized versus the unauthorized workforce, right? Which today, everybody that goes out and tries to find a job in this United States has to fill out something known as the I-9 form that declares you whether you're an authorized or an unauthorized worker. And the reality is that, human beings, since time immemorial, since the very first act is to work, to from the sweat of our brows, to feed our families, to put a roof over our head, to give a meaningful life to ourselves and to our families. And this sick system is willing to then create a system that says some people are authorized and other people's are not. And so we reject that colonial paradigm, that colonial system that qualifies us not only as unauthorized workforce, but then in slandering us, saying that we're illegal, right, as Mexican people on our own land. And so we reject those colonial laws, and that's the reason why this struggle has to be an anti-colonial struggle, as the comrades already laid out, right? It's US imperialism who created the situation for Haiti to be the way it is today. The invasions, the occupations, the extraction of resources, even its infrastructure that was weakened by the attack on Haiti, right? Where earthquakes can destroy entire towns, entire cities, the collapse of buildings, right? The lack of infrastructure there is a result of the stolen wealth and resources that we even see here. And so when we see Africans from Haiti coming, whether it be through Mexico or any other way into the United States, they're chasing after the same resources that were stolen from them over so many years. And as the brother that just preceded me, right, the military attack, the military assault against many of its presidents, right, even recently, whether they be colonial or not, if they don't function at the service of imperialism, the United States will move on them and assassinate them, right? Such as what happened to Jovenel Moises with the Colombian US trained mercenaries that were sent up there to assassinate that president, or the overthrow of Aristide of Haiti several years ago. Again, always with the always sanctioned by the United States. So, the migration or movement of people is not anything new. It's intensified because of the crisis of capitalism, because of the crisis of imperialism, of its ongoing wars against people, of its ongoing extraction of natural resources, of its of bringing those resources here and making it, the standard of living for a general colonial settler population very well off, while the rest of the world suffers in tremendous amounts of poverty and oppression. And so one of the things that we see in terms of, what's happening physically at the border with border patrol agents, in the tens of thousands, not only lining the border, but also different parts of the United States with tens of thousands of ICE agents. We see a whole economy that has been built around capturing, this so-called unauthorized workforce, right? And so even U.S. immigration policy itself, when we say that the Border Patrol and ICE, we see the need to demand abolishment of these institutions because they are modern day slave catchers. There's no doubt about it that their function is to determine or to regulate, those unauthorized workers that will come or will make it into the United States and should or could even work in the United States. That these modern day slave catchers are a product of this assault on our peoples. As a result, what we see is an economy built around capturing, around detaining, incarcerating, and deporting. The fact that there were more than 7,000 deportations just this year of Africans from Haiti, 4,000 from the border region, the massive infrastructure that you have to have in order to detain, to process, to put on a plane, to deport, and even monitor, right? We see our peoples shackled to these digital devices known as ankle monitors that track our movement, that track, where we go, who we meet with. In fact, they even put applications on the phones of many of the people who are allowed into the United States, and they're tracked to see who they meet with, who they converse with. So there is this whole even electronic shackling in the modern expression of colonial slavery. So, on top of that, we see the sick relationship that we are confronted with even vigilante settler terror and violence. The lynching of a Mexican just a few days ago, September 30th, we see people being lynched and attacking. The major criticism there was attacking Biden for inciting people to come, supposedly. But the reality is that there's perpetrators of violence, of colonial violence that have been happening and taking shape. And, before I end, I think it's really important that we do highlight, that international solidarity that has come about, that is demonstrated. We can't not have this conversation without acknowledging revolutionary Cuba that has had more than 20 years of medical collaboration. That's one of the reasons why I uphold my comrade here, Fidel Castro, and who created the medical missions throughout not only Latin America, but the world, and who today it continues that medical collaboration. Venezuela with more than 30 tons of food and medicine. And, even Mexico, despite it being doing the service of imperialism in terms of immigration, sent more than 1,729 tons of humanitarian aid. And that's important international solidarity that has to be recognized. And with that, I appreciate this opportunity to participate in this important discussion, and salute the African People's Socialist Party. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Comrade Benjamin, again from Unión do Barrio. Just really, I want to appreciate your presence on this program as well. I think that having this position from, our comrades in the Mexican liberation struggle, and just the whole struggle, the anti-colonial struggle of indigenous people on this land, this stolen land that the settler colonizer has legalized themselves to be able to dictate who can be on this land, and just being able to expose how this is an illegitimate this is a settler colony, and any policy, any law regarding immigration is illegitimate, and this whole system is illegitimate. Being able to determine the livelihoods and the futures of colonized and oppressed peoples here. So really appreciate your contribution to this program, Comrade Benjamin. And we're going to keep it moving, going to Comrade Penny Hess, who is the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, who will be speaking about reparations being owed. Oh, and the African People's Solidarity Committee is the organization founded by the African People's Socialist Party, an organization of white people working under the leadership of the party for reparations to African people in the belly of the beast, in the colonizer population, winning them to the African Revolution, again, under the leadership of the party and the African working class. So Comrade Penny Hess is the chairwoman of APSC and will be speaking about reparations being owed to Haiti, white solidarity with African people from Haiti, and white solidarity with the African Revolution. Uhuru, Chairman Penny.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Director Akile Anai, and I salute this powerful event of the African People's Socialist Party. It's a great honor to be able to be part of this today. I salute African people of Haiti and the Haitian Revolution and the African Revolution around the world, including inside the African colony here inside the United States. As has been said, I have the honor of being the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people working under the direct leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. APSC was formed by the party. We are completely accountable to the party's strategy, and we have the mandate to extend the African Revolution into the white population and to win white people's reparations to African people. So I salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, very much looking forward to his presentation today. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela is our leadership. I salute Deputy Chair Onizane Yeshitela, who guides and leads the day-to-day work of the African People's Solidarity Committee for reparations on many, many fronts of the party's work. And I salute the political theory of African internationalism created by Chairman Omali Yeshitela, which has enabled me and all of us in the African People's Solidarity Committee to see and understand the truth about the world and how it got to be the way it is. So I salute the incredible presentations of Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, Elikya and Ngoma, the Haiti editor of the Burning Spear newspaper, Dr. Matsemela Odom, Mr. Harold Compere, and Benjamin Prado of Union del Barrio. And, I want to express my unity with what has been put out and the struggle for the liberation of African people and indigenous people here and around the world. The people of Haiti, like Africans everywhere, including African people colonized inside the borders of the United States and other colonized peoples around the world, are impoverished and oppressed because the United States and Europe and white people in general are wealthy. And this has been said, but it is my responsibility as the colonizer to express this also, that white people have prosperity, have democratic rights because capitalism and the wealth of the white world exists through Europeans setting out beginning 600 years ago with a brutal, violent, ongoing assault on Africa, kidnapping and trafficking African human beings, turning African people into commodities for sale, stealing African labor, genius, resources, and land. And because Europe wiped out hundreds of millions of indigenous people, including the Taino people of Haiti, and stole their land, imposed colonialism on the majority of human beings on the planet for the benefit of US and Western imperialism and white people who serve as the colonizers. Chairman Omali Yeshitela has taught us and told us that the revolution of African people in Haiti, whose victory was led by Jean-Jacques Dessalines, representing the interests of the African working class, was the most profound assault on imperialism that the world has so far experienced. Chairman Omali Yeshitela has shown that colonialism is the mode of production of capitalism, that colonialism is how the entire white world is structured, how we get our wealth, how we experience prosperity, democracy, how we set our goals, how we see ourselves. And it is the basis for our own self-deceiving mythology and self-image as supposedly the highest example of civilization that in fact rests on incredible violence at the expense of African people and everybody else on the planet Earth. Our happiness requires the pain of others. For white people to do well economically, African and oppressed peoples must be brutally exploited. The fact that colonialism, as the Chairman Omali Yeshitela has said, is the mode of production for capitalism explains the lies we tell ourselves and the fact that we live on the proverbial pedestal on the backs of African and indigenous people without giving a thought to that every day of our lives. The fact that colonialism exists inside the borders of the United States, and the fact that enslaved African people fought and defeated the greatest imperialist army of its day, the army of Napoleon, and freed themselves means that the very mode of production of capitalism struck back with the greatest blow possible to the capitalist system. The colony of Saint-Domingue was the richest colony that France held, and now Haiti is the poorest country of the Western Hemisphere, quote unquote, which is, as has been said, which is put out in the media every single day. What African people in Haiti were forced to produce then as a colony of France comprised 30% of French trade, while Haiti's sugar represented 40% of the world market at that time, and about 60% of the coffee consumed in Europe was produced by African people forced to be enslaved in Haiti. This is why the US and Europe imposed, through the threat of violence, the first sanctions on the liberated government of Haiti, why it forced Haiti at the barrel of a gun to pay back the $90 billion in solid gold to France as, quote, reparations for the loss of French property, which was African human beings themselves. Payments that were made up until 1947 with the help of donations from the deeply impoverished people of Haiti themselves, who make an average of $350 a year now. For nearly a century, Haiti was forced to pay 80% of its treasury in these payments. The terrorism carried out by the US government against African people at the Texas border are not new. When he was president, Thomas Jefferson was very clear that he would do anything necessary to isolate and liberated Haiti, and that he refused to accept anyone immigrating from Haiti into the United States then. The wealth of Haiti fed France and Europe, and it's a significant part of what made and continues to make white people rich today. White people were complicit with US occupations of Haiti and the theft of the treasury in the 20th century. We were complicit with the installation of Baby Doc and Papa Doc Duvalier and the murderous Tonton Macoute forces backed by the US and terrorizing the people of Haiti and upheld by US-backed neocolonialism. This is why white people were complicit with the kidnapping of Aristide and the locking up of African people from Haiti in concentration camps when they were attempting to escape to the US. the US-backed terror in Haiti, attempting to reach the US on rafts and anything that floated. This is why the US population has been complicit with the theft of billions of dollars in aid after the 2010 earthquake, aid which never reached the people and was stolen and put into the coffers and pockets and bank accounts of William Clinton Foundation and other NGOs. And this is why the opportunist white leftists of the United States refuse to see that the African Revolution of Haiti was the leading successful revolution on this planet, the model for revolutionary struggle everywhere, not something like the French Commune or something that white workers carry out in Europe or inside the United States on the pedestal of the oppression of African people, and that white leftists have refused to see that the Haiti Revolution and its constitution, instituted in 1805, was the first governmental system anywhere that banned enslavement and instituted many of the standards of social justice found in subsequent socialist states' constitutions, and why white people refuse to see the future of the planet in the Haiti Constitution, which said that, quote, all citizens shall be known as Black, including white people if they renounce our allegiance and financial ties to the status of being the colonizer. The truth is that the future and reality of anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, socialist revolution everywhere and for everyone, including white colonizers, is to be found in the leadership of the African working class, the African People's Socialist Party, the African Socialist International, the Vanguard Revolutionary Party with its strategy to complete the African Revolution and liberate and unite Africa and African people everywhere for self-government, that this is the key to the destruction of colonial capitalism, and that the African Revolution is our revolution. The African Revolution is the revolution. It is the only way that imperialism will be destroyed once and for all, and that reparations must be paid as the return of the African wealth stolen on so many fronts in so many ways by white people over the last 600 years, with our complicity and carrying out of violence, genocide, and terror against African and indigenous peoples and oppressed people around the world, including and especially inside the colony of African people and indigenous people inside the borders of the United States. Reparations must be paid to the completion of the African Revolution. This is the revolutionary demand for white people, and why, in order to be organized, we must be organized under the leadership of the African working class, the African People's Socialist Party that leads the African Revolution. So to all white people, join the Uhuru movement, join the March for Reparations to African people in cities throughout the US on October 16th. Victory to African people in Haiti, victory to African people worldwide. Coupe tete, boule kai, unity through reparations. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairwoman Penny Hess from the African People's Solidarity Committee. Thank you so much for your presentation, and just want to echo the call: unity through reparations, white solidarity with Black power. That is the call, and that's coming from the leadership of the African working class, not some flimsy statement of solidarity we support or good white people, but working under leadership towards the African Revolution, and demanding reparations from the colonizer population. That is the principled stance of solidarity with the struggle of African people to be free and self-determining. So thank you, Chairwoman Penny. And now we're going to move to our keynote presentation, which will come from Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, founder of the theory of African internationalism, leader of the International African Revolution, and leader of the African Nation, who will speak to the unity of African people with our brothers and sisters in Haiti and completing the African Revolution against colonialism. Uhuru, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, welcome to the program.
Uhuru. Thank you so much, Comrade Director Akile. I would like to express my appreciation to all of the participants in this important webinar, and especially to Comrade Harold Compere, Comrade Benjamin Prado from Union de Barrio. And speaking of Union de Barrio, I think there is much to be learned from the relationship that the African People's Socialist Party enjoys with Union de Barrio, that's nearly 40 years old, as revolutionary organizations comprised of indigenous and African people who are colonized within the United States. Also, Comrade Chairwoman Penny Hess, who I selected as the chair of the African People Solidarity Committee some years ago, and have continued to do that for a number of years. Comrade Penny made the point earlier on of a certain kind of responsibility to show solidarity with African people that that Europeans should recognize, and that is true. But part of what we know as African internationalists is that this is not some charitable exercise that white people or Europeans need to impose upon themselves. African internationalism teaches us that all of the people who consider themselves interested in the destruction of the capitalist system, and many white people do so, have a responsibility to make that revolution of overturning capitalism. And what we understand is that they must come to the conclusion that the foundation of capitalism is colonialism. And that's part of what makes this discussion about Haiti so important. That's part of what makes the participation of Comrade Benjamin Prado and Union de Barrio so important. And speaking of Union de Barrio, it's hard to do so and speak to this near 40-year relationship without calling attention to Comrade Ernesto Bustillo, who for a long period of time was the chair of Union de Barrio, who was under recognized revolutionary force, not only on this continent, but I dare to say what they also characterize as South America, who bears the responsibility of really pursuing and building the unity between our two peoples through the advanced detachment of the part of the African and Mexican working class. Speaking to the fact that what Europeans or white people or North Americans are engaged in terms of this relationship with the African People's Socialist Party, it is also necessary to say that this webinar is held under the leadership of a revolutionary party, a revolutionary organization. Our responsibility as a party is to win the total liberation and unification of Africa and all African people around the world, on the one hand, and to do this through overturning the social system that is responsible for our oppression and responsible for the oppression and despair that's experienced by the majority of human beings on the planet Earth. And so while we will talk and have talked up to now about the various assaults that's being made on African people in Haiti, while we talk about what happened under the bridge in Del Rio, Texas, and what's happening at the border, the illegitimate border of California and San Juan and California. The fact is that nothing is extraordinary that we've talked about here. When we talk about what happened with the US invasion of Haiti that resulted in stealing everything from the Haitian treasury and taking that to New York, the first international embargo, certainly in this hemisphere, that was imposed on anybody that was initiated against Haiti to force Haiti to pay what they characterized as reparations for the theft, for taking back our own power, our own labor, our own humanities, et cetera. This is just part of what we recognize to have occurred from Baby Doc and Papa Doc Duvalier, all of these things, which we are treating most often as extraordinary, should not be considered extraordinary at all. The presence of Black people in this island that has come to be known as Haiti was the extraordinary act. The fact is that in the process of developing a whole new world economy, Europe attacked Africa. Europe attacked Africa and brought Africans onto this island we call Haiti, from various locations on the continent of Africa. And before these Africans got to that island, they were not Haitians. And in fact, this was something that would happen with the revolution. The fact is that we were groups of people who had been rounded up and brought to this island to make resources for France and ultimately for Europe. And this has been talked about and discussed with some detail throughout this process. And it was Africans who, upon achieving our liberation, did not characterize ourselves, did not name ourselves as Franco-Afros or Afro-French, something to that extent. We took the name of the land that had been given to it by the Taino people who had, upon whom genocide had been imposed, and characterize ourselves with this name of this land, of this dispossessed, murdered population. And so in many ways, this population lived in us, in the struggle. And in many ways, we see the embryo of the emergence of a reconsolidated African nation, coming from a process that was designed to separate Black people from, and did in fact separate African people from each other from all around the world. We come to this island and we have this revolutionary process that is initiated on this island. And in this island, where there might have been different groups of people, we saw again the emergence of the incipient African nation that is growing, that is increasingly moving to achieve greater definition. And so I just think it's really important to understand that. I think it's important to understand that we have this responsibility as revolutionaries. We are African internationalists. We believe in revolution as the means by which we overturn the existing social system. And we believe that we have to assume a scientific approach to making that happen. And therefore, it's necessary for us to use certain tools, certain methods of investigation and analysis that we call historical dialectic and historical materialism. This is something that was really perfected by somebody named Karl Marx, who had his own contradictions, obviously, but we felt like the method of investigation was really, really important. We see the limitations in Marx's investigation in the fact that he did not recognize the significance of what was happening in Haiti and many others. And so start history with things like the revolutionary history, a progressive history, with things like the French Revolution and the Paris Commune. But what we know is that the Paris Commune, where the workers took power briefly in Paris, when they lost that and were defeated and crushed, that movement was crushed. Many of them were exiled into French colonies and like New Caledonia. And today what we see is in New Caledonia, the children of the French Commune have taken power over the majority of the Black people who are native to that land and that territory. And part of the point being made is that colonialism is the primary driving force for the existence of this social system. And that in France, despite that you had left colonizers, you still had colonizers. And you had reactionary colonizers, you still had colonizers. And what we're saying is that with the assault on Africa and the initiation of this trade in African people, the development of what Karl Marx called the primitive accumulation of capital, that was a startup, beginning process for capitalism itself. A whole new world system has come into existence, and it becomes impossible to look at France just by itself, and to look at what's happening in various other places around the world as this casual relationship between different countries and economies. We see the emergence of a whole new world system, a world economy. We're talking about a time frame where, again, we look at the French Revolution. We look at the Paris Commune. We're talking about a process that would see half of Mexico stolen. Back in, what was that, 1889, the assault that was made, the so-called struggle that was made with where France had to lose half of what is now known as the United States. And when we say it had to lose half of the United States, we're talking about the indigenous people who occupied these territories had nothing to say about any of this, that where Roosevelt, not Roosevelt, but Jefferson actually purchased for $15 million from a desperate French government all of this territory. And then this is colonialism. This is the theft of the land and resources of the indigenous people, the theft and land of the resources, half of Mexico. That's colonialism. That's the foundation for this entire system. 1898, the assault that stole Hawaii, the land that we characterize as Hawaii, was taken in 1898. When we look at the assault in the so-called Spanish-American War, where European powers, Spain and the United States, engaged in this war for colonial territories, that the United States then comes into possession of Cuba, Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, etc. During this time frame. So we're looking at a time frame we're talking about primitive accumulation of capital, where all of these resources now coming together to build and consolidate the whole colonial capitalist world economy. And this is important for us to understand, because we have been described as simply some kind of auxiliaries to footnotes to a history that's been made by Europeans, whether they call themselves workers, whether they call themselves Marxists, or whether they just call themselves Adam Smith followers, etc. The fact is that the whole development of what we now know as capitalism came about as colonialism, and you can actually see it, and you can actually quantify it. You can see the emergence of this consolidated Europe, the consolidated European consciousness, the consolidation of a common economy that came to be known as capitalism, that we refer to more correctly as colonial capitalism. We say that colonialism was the mode of production that brought dragged Europe out of 1,000 years of feudal existence into the place where it is now. So when we see and understand what has happened in Haiti, and what is happening in Venezuela and Cuba and all of these other places, we're not looking at something new or abnormal. We're seeing a normal part of the process of the consolidation or the ongoing struggle to maintain a world that has its origin in colonial domination, and has at different times being known as the domination by the white man over the rest of the world. And concretely, that's what it is that we are looking at. That's what it is that we have to struggle against. And that's one of the reasons that the Haitian Revolution offers so many lessons for us that we need to learn, not the least of which was the fact that in Haiti, again, we saw the beginning of the consolidation of the African nation. And of course, and when I say that, I'm not saying that Africans didn't exist for thousands of years on the continent of Africa. What I'm saying is that we see the emergence of this process that happens in Haiti at the very same time that we see a process that's destroying the consolidation of the unity of Africa and African people. We see the emergence of this revolutionary project. And of course, the problem, a fundamental problem with Haiti and its consolidation of what it needed to do is the fact that it was in a process of having to do it more or less alone. At the same time, there were various cross currents of struggle happening in Haiti itself. That we see in Haiti also the raging class struggle that's happening within the struggle for national liberation. Sometimes this class struggle was characterized as struggle that was being made with mulattoes or other forces, sometimes black as such, who were engaged in solidarity, unity with France, even as this revolutionary project was made. In Haiti, this revolutionary, this remarkable movement of this island, this handful of people, more or less, if you look at just the population of African people in Haiti, how it reshaped the whole world, how it challenged the existence of a capitalist system that was based on slavery, how it created a constitution that prohibited not only slavery, but prohibited the white man or the colonizers from owning any land on the continent in Haiti, and how it took the invasion of the United States Marines at gunpoint to force the election that was not accepted of somebody chosen by the United States to preside over Haiti, forced at gunpoint, tried to impose a constitution that changed the laws that allowed the Europeans to own the land. This is something we're talking about happened under the leadership of a remarkable, well-known and respected President Woodrow Wilson, who was the same president who talked about how wonderful this movie that was made that held up, he called it something like something being written in lightning, this something of nations that was done many years ago, who was a supporter of the Ku Klux Klan. And so when you look at colonialism, you look at Haiti, you look at the border, you're not looking at anything unusual. And I challenge anybody to tell me a point in time where Africans who, first of all, were kidnapped and taken to Haiti, lived without intervention, without attacks, without assaults, without murder, without an ongoing aggression being made to it that would make being under that bridge in Del Rio, Texas, unusual or peculiar. In fact, it was not unusual, it was not peculiar, it was ordinary when it comes to how Africans and colonized people, but Africans in particular, have been treated in the process of creating this and maintaining the social system that people refer to as capitalism, and we more appropriately recognize as colonial capitalism. And because we, as a consequence of the African people now having our own revolutionary party, we have possession of our own brains and we can define our own reality. And we know that Africa and African people did not play some minimal role in the advent of this whole capitalist system. We know that it was not something that happened with the Paris Commune that was remarkable, that helped to set terms for how revolution should be made. We know that this primitive accumulation that Karl Marx talked about, which included turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of black skins, is what we refer to as colonialism. And so we can identify our own significance, which is critical, because as recently as 1907, in Stuttgart, Germany, a meeting that had at least 60,000 white people attending this socialist conference, at 60,000 who participated on the outdoor event. There was a resolution that was passed at this Congress, this Congress of the Africans of the Communist International that called for the creation of a socialist colonialism. That is to say, it fought against any resolution that Europe should get rid of colonialism under socialism, and said instead, recognize concretely, and then say, because we don't like black people, even though that was inferred of many of the statements that were made during that, but recognize what are we going to do with the surplus population we have in Europe? What are we going to do with the resources that we are developing that needs to be traded and sent to other places around the world? Where are we going to get the get these resources that go into production, et cetera. And they indicated that colonialism was the answer. And that's what had to happen. And so this was the highest representative of the white world at this time that made this vote in 1907 in Stuttgart, Germany, during the Third International. So I just think that the Second International, I think it's really important for us to really come to terms with our own role in making revolution, our own role in fighting to overturn this kind of social system, so that we don't have to be some kind of forces that recognize our significance as only auxiliaries or supporters of some other force that's going to bring freedom, that it is we who will have to bring this freedom. We can do it. I appreciate Dessalines in particular, because Dessalines broke with Toussaint, and Toussaint, who was recognized as a real military genius, et cetera, but Toussaint respected France. And he actually had surrendered at a particular point. I don't know if you call it surrender, but yeah, he surrendered at a particular point. And he agreed to a meeting that many people, certainly Dessalines, said it's crazy to meet with the French under these terms. And of course, the French sailed off and killed him, and locked him up in a prison, froze him to death, took his children as well with him. Dessalines was somebody who never trusted the French, never trusted the French. And of course, Dessalines was helped in his suspicion of the French based on the contradiction that Malcolm X often talked about between the field Negro and the house Negro. In fact, Toussaint was somebody who worked as a house Negro. He was a coachman and really close to his owners, and in fact did what he could to protect them, to make sure that no harm would come to them during this whole revolutionary process. But Toussaint was different, and Toussaint had not been educated by the French as Dessalines had not been educated by the French as Toussaint. He was extraordinarily suspicious of the French, not because of something he had read, but because of the relationship. He knew that he and African people who were oppressed and worked like animals, beasts for the French, had to endure on a regular basis. So he was opposed to the deal that Toussaint made. And he is the one who really organized the revolution. And he was recognized also, even if reluctantly so, as a military genius. And many people don't like to say that or like to recognize that. They want to recognize the genius of Toussaint, but they want to recognize the genius of Toussaint primarily because Toussaint was more French-like and able to make deals and reconciliation with the French. But if the French murdered children and women and whole communities, villages, as they did do, Dessalines had a policy of tit for tat. If they've done that to us, we would do that to them. And this, of course, raised all kind of alarm. All of Europe was excited and extraordinarily upset because of all these white people being killed by the Haitian Revolution. They were not concerned and upset about African people being enslaved on this land that they call Haiti. They were not concerned about the murder that went on normally and consistently by French against African people who lived in Haiti. But when Africans picked up our capacity, picked up the weapons and began to kill the whites, then that was a matter of some concern. Even today, you can read how Haiti had problems under Dessalines because of the economic policies that would not allow Europeans to own land, and how because of his willingness to fight to the end with the French and everybody who upheld the French, but it was also Dessalines who allowed white people to escape from the fate of the colonizer. They could become Black. They could renounce their whiteness and they could unite with the African people in Haiti, the Haitian Revolution and what have you. And some did that. And again, it has already been discussed about the remarkable constitution that came into existence under the leadership of Dessalines, removing the whole notion of something like a illegitimate child, taking care of children and old people and all of that a part of the normality, the norm. And it was the United States government that over and over again attacked that, because Haiti, first, this pearl of the Antilles for the French, maintained itself as a remarkable significance to the United States. And I should mention that Germany played a role here too, because it was Germany that had begun trading relationships and had to get around the constitutional edict that prohibited white people from owning land, began to intermarry with Haitian women on the island. And this became what the United States perceived as a threat from Germany, and was one of the other reasons that it was incited to make sure that the Haitian Revolution was what the Haitian government was destroyed, and the United States could come in as a neo-colonial force that could dominate the entire all of Haiti. And so I think it's really important for us to understand that at this point in time in history, that Dessalines was right, that there has to be complete freedom. There can be no partial freedom. There can be no such thing as partial freedom. And for the first time in history, the African people have our own revolutionary party that is a party of the African working class, globally, internationally, that accepts for ourselves the responsibility of the liberation of all of Africa and all of African people, and extending the whole discussion and definition of nationality to all of us as African people, and allowing Haiti and Africans who live in Haiti to be recognized as a part of the Haitian nation, the African nation, and the Haitian front of the African Revolution, with one party that's organized all the time to make revolution, to come to power, struggling to govern, to have is our own capacity. It's the responsibility of the party to organize ourselves globally, like the Garvey movement did, like what was really important, necessary. If the Africans in Haiti could have done it, it would have made a major difference, even in how the Haitian government did look eventually, and how Dessalines ended up having to govern, because he took his model of governance from France. When Napoleon made himself emperor, not to be outdone, Dessalines made himself an emperor, etc. And the point is that we now living in this time in history, with the lessons that we've learned from Haiti, lessons we've learned from revolution throughout the world, we know that a different kind of government can happen, and that government has to be a government that's in possession of the African working people who create all the value. That it was this war on Haiti that was to take the value that was created by working people in Haiti. Now, you had a proletarian nation that was trying to express itself. You had the dictatorship of the working class under the leadership of Dessalines that was distorted because Dessalines did not have access to workers, African workers, in various other places. I cannot overstate the impact of the Haitian Revolution. You've heard some things about it, but it influenced revolution throughout the Americas, and it influenced revolutionary struggle throughout the Caribbean and what have you. It made determinations of how struggles would happen in how Europe began to shape constitutions. As Comrade Luwezi mentioned, slavery had to be ended by France because of what happened in Haiti. But even today, in places like Guadeloupe and that France still hold African people living under colonialism. We have to make the revolution. We have to take the lessons of Dessalines. We have to empower the African working class. We have to recognize that the African working class is international, and that it represents the advanced detachment of the advancement of the formation of the revolutionary African nation itself. What began in Haiti, where Haiti moved and actually initiated the process of building an international movement, has to be completed in this day. And that's the responsibility of the African People's Socialist Party, the African Socialist International. To make this revolution is our responsibility everywhere we are located, to spread African internationalism, to inflame the consciousness and the brains of African people on every continent where we are located to African internationalism. We are one Africa, we are one nation of people, and we have one organization with one center, with one objective, and that is the total, absolute liberation and unification of Africa and African people worldwide. We say, Israel to Africa. Africa is our land. We have to make this revolution. Vanguard up, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, Vanguard up, Israel to Africa, Africa, one nation. Just really want to appreciate such a brilliant presentation. I mean, it was just really profound, Chairman. I really appreciate the whole webinar, all of our speakers, and just this, again, incredible presentation, Chairman, like that just really captures everything that's been discussed up to now. So I'm going to move again to just call on people to, based on everything that you've heard today, really call on you to take part in this struggle and join the African Revolution, and go to apspuhuru.org to fill out our contact form, to have more information about the Revolutionary Party, our own vehicle that the chairman was just talking about, learning more about this and signing up to join at apspuhuru.org. Indicate in the comment section that you want to join the Uhuru movement. I want to join the African People's Socialist Party. Again, indicate that in the chat, or go to apspuhuru.org to fill out our contact form. And I also, again, want to encourage those who are watching to donate to the work of the chairman at paypal.me/Omali taught me. That, the work that Chairman Omali Yeshitela has been doing over the last 50 years with the, being the author of the theory of African internationalism, that allows us to have this discussion in this context, that we, have to just really recognize and salute our leadership, and just, just recognize that everything that we set up to this point is based on the fact that now we have our own theory that is explaining our world, our place in it. So paypal.me/Omali taught me to make a contribution to the works of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So this has been a very dynamic program. And just to recap, we've heard from Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa of the African Socialist International, Comrade Elikya Ngoma, who is our Haiti expert and Haiti editor for the Burning Spear newspaper. We've heard from Comrade Dr. Matsemela Odom, the Vice President of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. We've heard from Comrade Harold Compere from Concerned Haitians and Friends. We've heard from Comrade Benjamin Prado from Unión del Barrio, Penny Hess, the chairwoman of the African People Solidarity Committee, and our very own chairman. And so we've heard, so much for this discussion just being opened wide up. And I think that what we've also heard today is, all this evidence of this movement really growing, this system, falling apart as based on our efforts to destroy it. And that there's so much that we can be doing, that we're not just having this conversation, but that we're talking about this because there is work to be done right now. We can get involved in joining organization, getting organized to fight colonial capitalism, which has been summed up as the core of the contradiction. But I just really want to salute our presenters today, and just thank you so much for what you've contributed to this program, to the world's understanding of the Haiti question, and the question of deportations as not this anti-immigration issue, but a colonial issue of the question of being colonized and needing to destroy colonialism. So this has just been a very profound discussion, and just really want to salute you, comrades. So we're going to wrap up now, but I just wanted to pass it back to you, Chairman, for any closing remarks before we conclude today's webinar.
Thank you, Comrade Director Akile. The only thing I would say is to repeat the fact that we cannot coexist with this social system, that it has to go, and that we have to conclude that our primary responsibility is the destruction of the system. That even if we find ourselves engaged in various kinds of reforms and demanding better treatment for people who are being treated badly, as a revolutionary party, we recognize that the system can't treat us better than it does treat us. It becomes, these demands become really something that we use to help to educate and mobilize the people. But we do that while helping the people to understand that African people have a responsibility to be free, and that we have our own party to lead that struggle to be free. And that we have this struggle, that we are not alone. First of all, we are not alone because we are almost every continent in the world. Secondly, we are not alone because there are other people who are colonized too. And we have a responsibility to unite with those. Just as what was happening, we look at the relationship between Union de Barrio and the African People's Socialist Party. But we could see that coming if we saw how Africans in Haiti named Haiti in relationship. That was a profound statement of solidarity with indigenous people. And those who would try to divert us from that kind of solidarity, that kind of anti-colonial revolutionary solidarity, and especially that solidarity, revolutionary solidarity that is under the leadership of the working class. They represent problems for us, and we have to dismiss them and move toward total liberation. So let's fight to deal with the immigration questions. They are horrible questions. The only time we saw something that looked like it was going to be different is when under James Earl Carter, the same guy who initiated the war in Afghanistan that we still see consequences from. He had to justify allowing so-called Haitian immigrants into the country because they had a need to allow reactionary Cubans who were against revolution to come into this country. And then, of course, we saw the Ronald Reagan administration with the wet foot, dry foot policy, where the Mexican, because no matter how the Cubans, no matter how they got here, reactionary Cubans, they were allowed immigrant status, so they could be on the water, etc. But when the only Africans from Haiti could only be given immigrant status if they were on the land, if they made it to the land, if they stopped them in the water, if they stopped them on a boat, as often was the case, then they could not achieve immigrant status. And even when they got to land, in many instances, they were thrown into concentration camps in this country. So the fact is that as African people, it is absolutely our responsibility to take off the blinders and take off the wishful thinking and hoping that one day that the colonial capitalist white world will accept us and will treat us according to some legal norms. When the fact is that it's the colonizer who makes the law. It's the oppressor who makes the law. It is the state, the oppressor state, that legalizes everything it does. And what our responsibility is as the African nation, under the leadership of the African working class, we have to take state power so that we can legalize. We are the ones who creates the law, and we can make them illegal. And so I just wanted to say that, and thank you so much. And join the party, join the revolution. All solidarity, all the colonized people who are fighting against this social system, and victory to the struggle against colonialism and the struggle for a socialist new world. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Thank you so much. Again, thank you to all of our presenters, all of you for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV channel on YouTube, as well as like and follow the Chairman Omali Yeshitela on Facebook for more political education such as this. Subscribe to the channel to catch every episode of Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, all of these pop-up live webinars, as well as the different events that we do. Thank you again, comrades, so much. And we're going to go ahead and adjourn this webinar. Vive Haiti, coupe tête, Boulekai, Vanguard.